While still in college, James Wolcott sent Norman Mailer his critique of the author's famed appearance on the Dick Cavett Show with Gore Vidal. Mailer responded with a letter letting him know that he would be happy to endorse Wolcott should he ever come to New York City and look for a job. Soon after, he did, dropping out of college and going to New York. For the next 4 decades, he chronicled the world of culture as a critic for such publications as The Village Voice, The New Yorker, and Vanity Fair. His often acid-tongued reviews, some say, have taken aim at everyone from Salman Rushdie to Pauline Kael. Now, with the completion of his first novel, The Cat Sitters, the critic joins the ranks of the critiqued. I'm pleased to welcome him back to this table. Welcome back.
It's nice to be back.
It's great to have you here. Lots of things I didn't know about you in terms of getting in, but why this? Why a novel for you?
Well, the thing is, I wanted to write a novel, but at the same time, I didn't want to write a novel for the sake of writing a novel.
Yeah.
You know, there's a famous story about John Cleese ran into an old friend at a party in London, and Cleese asked the person what he was doing, and the person said, well, I'm working on a novel. And Cleese said, what a coincidence, neither am I. You know, because it's one of the things everybody says they're doing, but in fact it's sort of off. So I wanted to write one, but at the same time I did not want to duplicate the experience of doing journalism. I didn't want to write a novel that would be gossip and drag, or a novel that would be journalism and drag. I wanted to use a different voice, and I also wanted to tell a story rather than use a novel just as kind of throw out your opinions. Like, here are all the opinions I can't use in my column, but I'm going to put them in a book.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Right. So how did you come to this story then? Was there somebody outside that stimulated you to do this, or were you in search of fiction that I can write?
Well, I had a friend who I was talking to a lot at the time, and I was like talking out another idea for a novel, and she said, well, you know, you're going through this experience. Why don't you just write about what you're going through?
This experience was?
Well, the experience was a breakup that, in a sense, hit me much harder than it should have, because I had had other breakups, but I went much lower in terms of my morale than I had ever anticipated. And I realized that it has something to do, it's larger than this breakup, but I didn't know what. But I also knew, well, I've got to sort of pull my life together. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to write about a character who's going to be going through it, and then I'm going to be going through it at the same time. So I won't be falsifying the emotions, because I'm going to be going through them. And also I put myself through a lot of the same experiences, a lot of which never made it in the novel. But I thought I'll go through it, in a sense, use myself as a test pilot. And it's sort of, there was a writer who wrote a novel called In Praise of Older Women. He said, between books, I consider myself material. I use myself as material. And then when I write, I distance myself from it. So that's what I did. I made myself material.
Okay, but explain to me how you did that. I mean, you lost me in some, but you made yourself material, but you distanced yourself as well, like he did, or not?
No, I distanced myself when I actually did the writing.
Right.
What I did was, for example, in the novel, Johnny Downs has to start dating again.
Johnny Downs is your character.
Yeah, he's an actor.
The plot.
Well, he's an actor slash bartender,
right,
who's just kind of moving along sideways in life. And what his friend Darlene Ryder says is, you're not moving sideways, you're moving down, and you just don't know it. It's just a slow drift downward. Right. And what she tells him is, one of the reasons you're failing with women, and will continue to fail, is you've reached the end of your bachelorhood. Women now look at you, and they want to see a serious person. They want to see a potential husband, because they don't want to waste their time.
Right.
There are a lot of things you can get away with in your 20s that you can't get away with in your 30s. In fact, one of the mistakes I see people make all the time is they're dating the way they, in the 30s, the way they did 10 years ago, and it's not going to move them forward. So I did a lot of the things in terms of, I actually went on proper dates. I really redid my apartment. In the novel, she tells him, it's very important to be a good host. Women are impressed by host skills. So I threw parties. And the thing was, it was really fun. I mean, I had a party where I had Albert Goldman in one corner of the room, James Toback, and Stanley Crouch. It was like, it was like,
that's a party. That's a good party.
That's a good party. Three, super talkers.
Right.
So I put myself through that. But then when you start writing, the more you're writing, the more you're distancing yourself from yourself and whoever you knew at the time. Right. At a certain point, it becomes about making the characters work.
So, and the characters are, I mean, you are Johnny in part because you are drawing on those experiences and attitudes and conversations that you had, but...
Yeah, well, but the thing was, what I did was I thought, because when I was in high school and college, I was very interested in the theater. I did a lot, I did backstage stuff, and I thought, okay, suppose I hadn't become an English major, suppose I hadn't become a writer, suppose I had actually gone into the theater, what kind of person would I be? And I realized you'd relate to people on a totally different level. You wouldn't, for one thing, you wouldn't intellectualize about them. You'd respond to people in terms of their gestures, their behavior, their body language. And so, I mean, one of the things I did when I was working on this was I did a lot of reading, which I hope gets under the surface of the book, in body language. What they call proximics, which is just, you know, the spatial relations between people. Little things like that that I just sort of worked out.
So what did you, worked out means what?
Well, you know, for example, I wanted to see like how a character would relate to people totally not knowing anything about them, just on a physical basis and figuring them out. You know, the way you sort of figure them out, whereas, you know, as a writer, writers actually, in many ways, they're much more likely to pigeonhole a person, to say, oh, he said this, therefore they're that type of person. Actors are much more responsive. They're much less judgmental. And I wanted to have a character who would be not judgmental the way a writer is. In a sense, be a sponge, you know, absorb it.
Yeah, and the body language played its role in what way, in terms of what you learned from body language?
Well, just that I always thought body language is important. Now I find it even more important. I find myself relating to it much more than the actual words a person's saying. I'm very aware of tense body language. I'm very aware of angry body language. And you see, in New York, you really see it because people are like corkscrewed. They're so full of tension and anxiety.
So you talked, a friend basically says to you, back to the beginning of this, write about what you, essentially the old argument, write about what you know.
Yeah.
Right?
Write about what you know. But also the fact is, by putting yourself through experiences, if you mess up, if you make a fool of yourself, that's good for the book.
Yeah.
See, in most things in life, we tend to we take our failures so deeply, and it's like, oh, well, I'm never going to do that again because I embarrassed myself. In this situation, like if I embarrass myself, I think, oh, you know, I could use that.
That would work. That would work. It would make my character more vulnerable, more interesting, more complex, more all of that.